Welcome back, and today I thought we'd have a go at doing something slightly different, not drawing, but observational work and working together, which can be quite nice as families or small groups, and having a go at making our own seashell. So it helps with all observational work to work from reality rather than a photograph. Now, you don't have to have anything as fancy as this very large seashell. You could use something much more closer to hand, like these two small shells. And there's enough information and detail there for you to get some really nice designs and ideas. I'm going to use clay for this process because I happen to have lots around. This is clay that you fire in a kiln, but you could use air drying clay, or you could use these things to make your own clay that doesn't need to be cooked or baked. So take your ball of clay that you've either made or bought for hand drying. If it's clay that's going to go in a kiln, then you're going to have to make sure that it's got all the air bubbles taken out of it, in which case you're going to have to and knead it to knock out all the air bubbles. Otherwise it could explode in the kiln. So you need to get it into a nice little ball. And a good way to start is to have your ball of clay and then hold it in one hand and take your thumb and press into the centre. And start off by making a pinch pot using your fingers and your thumb. And just work your way round, squeezing and pressing the pot. Really, your pot should be about 1/2 centimetre to 1 centimetre thick. Anything thicker than that will be very difficult to fire. But as I said, you don't have to fire your shell. If you use homemade materials, then you can just leave it to dry, depending on the instructions that you've read. So I'm starting to, and it's really important to get the base nice and thin. And as it gets bigger, I'm using both hands. And once you're happy with your pot, this pot's quite soft. It's easier to work with clay when it's nice and supple. But for modelling it can and sometimes needs to become a bit firmer. So we've got the beginnings of our very own pinch pot. And this is a good starting point for making our shell, because our original shell, if we cut this bit open here, which we're not going to do, but if we cut it open, we'd realise it was a spiral inside. But we're only going to copy what we can actually see. And as you can see here, it's sort of a pot shape. Just needs a little bit of squishing and changing to make it a little bit longer. So we're going to start by copying that idea using our pinch pot. As you can see, then when you turn the pot over, again, there's a similarity, and we will just need to slightly change the shape. So there's a thinner end and a fatter end. So this is where we've got to with our shell. If you're finding your hands are a little bit clumsy for this work, then you could use a fork and use the end. It's got a lovely curved edge, which is just like a clay modelling tool, and you could start to model your clay using the end of this fork, which is a little bit finer than our fingers. Well, I've left my sculpture for a little while and it did go harder, and I couldn't come back to it when I wanted to, so I put a damp cloth over the top of it, and that's helped it to not get any more drier than I would have liked it to be. Said if it gets too dry, you can't take sculpture, clay sculpture, backwards. You can only go forward with it. So it is definitely less squidgy. The moisture from the cloth has put a damp film over the surface, but it hasn't got into the clay, so it is a lot less squidgy than it was before. And from this point I can do some further work on it. The other thing about walking away and leaving it is that you have a chance to come back and reassess it. And sculpture is very like drawing in that you initially put down a lot of information in a short space of time, and then you walk away and you come back and you see lots of mistakes. Now, for the beginner or someone new to drawing, this can be quite disheartening, but for those more experienced, you realise that this is the real sort of eureka moment, because you see things that you hadn't seen before, and this is what observational drawing and observational sculpture is all about. So you then have the opportunity to alter and change your initial drawing, or in this case a sculpture. So, and sometimes it's tempting to leap in and make massive changes, but I would guard against doing that, because sometimes the initial response is actually a really nice one. So I'm just using my fingers to tweak the sculpture at the moment, because I can see, I mean, there's nothing wrong with fingerprints, but sometimes your nails leave marks that you don't necessarily want. Of course, when it's a bit drier again, you can actually go over with a pebble and burnish the surface even further, and that will take out some lumps and bumps that you might not want. But you can't do it now, it's too soft. Even now you would have to go back when it's a little bit drier again. So it really is now time to just finish the sculpture off and then leave it to dry. And I'm just deciding what to do about some elements of it. And I think what I'll do is I'm tempted to cut away the messy edge, but actually what I think I will do is I think I will just soften it and leave it as it is, because I quite like it. And I know it's not quite like that on the shell, but it's my shell, so I can do what I like with it. So obviously it's not a real shell. It's just a copy. So I can add my own touches to it. And of course, once you've finished, you can just leave it to dry out. As I said, you could burnish it with a pebble, or otherwise you could leave it to dry completely. And if you're not going to fire it, you could then paint it and decorate it the way you want. But that's the finished version. So have fun, and if you want to share your results, then you can post them on my website www.susanrhughes.co.uk.